checking for the error itself. And if that happens, you would be sending a very specific response, right? Which in this case, we are sending a 400 status, which says, hey, something sent by the client wasn't right. And we are sending this message where we are saying user already exists, please sign in or use another email, all right? This is how you handle a very specific error, right? And if there is any error that you know could arrive, but you don't want to handle it, on case basis, you can simply throw the error to the middleware, to a generic default middleware, which would handle all the errors generated by the platform, right? And what you do is you send the error to the middleware, to the next middleware, right? And if it's of type error, it's automatically going to be received by the error global error handler, right? Code here. So if you throw error, if you send the error from here to the next middleware, Express.js is already gonna know that this is whatever you sent here is of type error, and it's automatically gonna take the error to this middleware here, which has 4 parameters, right? So that becomes the error handler, global error handler, and then you are gonna receive the error in here, all right? And then what you do with the error, precisely is more on you, all right? And in this case here, in the else part, what we are doing is we are saying, hey, we don't want to look into what the error is. Simply, we are going to say there was something went wrong, and we are going to send a status of 500. Anything sent in 400s and 500s is going to generate an error, right? Is considered an error. And if you want to handle errors generated by JOI specifically, if you want to send a JSON response for that, you would first of all check if the error generated is, an error by JOI, right? And this is something that we saw in the JOI documentation itself, where in the error object, they set a key is JOI, which could be true or false, right? If it's true, that means it's a JOI error. And if it is a JOI error, we know that the problem is not on the server itself, right? Because JOI is used for parameters validation, right? So if this is true, that means it was a JOI error. And then in that case, we set the status to 400, and we automatically, set the message and error key, set the values, and then send it to the front end, right? Again, specific errors, right? Send generic errors to the error handler here on line number 24, and add a default error handler in app.js, a middleware at the end, which would manage all, which would manage all the errors, including JOI and any other errors sent, right? Any question or any doubt?
The JOI errors,
Mhm.
when it is a JOI, is it specifically 400 or is it the 400 series?
It could actually be, good
I mean, can it
question.
be a 401, 403?
Okay, let's go through those status, HTTP statuses. So the thing is, JOI just send you the error, right? JOI does not decide the status for you,
Yes.
right? It's us deciding status 400 on line number 34. Uh, so it's definitely going to be client error. That's something we know for sure. So it has to be something in 400s, right? Now let's see what are the errors in 400 and if there's anything more precise. So right now we are sending 400, which is bad request, which is like saying, hey, something you sent from the front end just does not make sense. All right. So it's very generic in nature. Um, 401 is unauthorized. So right now in our system, there's no authorization that we are doing. There's no login, sign up, or there are no roles as such, right? and we are not checking if a call was made by a specific person. And anyway, JUI is not going to check for any authorization either, right? It's just validating my parameters. So that rules out 401. 402 payment required. If you see this sign, this means this is experimental, right? This is not a standard right now. Uh, Definitely not the case. We have no pages hidden behind the payment firewall. Forbidden, no. Not found, not really. Yeah, not found is something you can provide if you are looking for a user, but you know you don't find the user in the database, right? But that also would be a very precise error, let's say here, right? But again, for JUI, yeah, I think you would be sending 400. Nothing else would make sense.
So or maybe we can send it when we do get for a user.
I'm really sorry. Can you speak a little loudly? I can't hear you.
Uh, 404, we can send it when we do get for certain user.
You're saying we can send 404 when we get a user?
Yes.
Yeah, that's something we can do. So if you get a user, let's say if you have a GET request for a very specific user, right? For instance, if we had a GET request for a very specific user where we said, hey, uh, get me user number 3, right? And here we have ID. Not gonna use any schema here. And this SQL query would become select star from users where ID equals question mark. And here you would have ID, right? Which we just declared here, right? And yeah, here you can check if you get any error, you can be more precise. You don't even need to check this, right? Maybe we would simply said if there is an error, uh, no need to check this. We won't even send it further. If there's an error, response status 404, right? And we could actually say user not found. So this would be our if condition. Oh, uh, sorry, response.end bracket close. This bracket will close here. So this bracket, okay, I messed up brackets here. So this if condition would end here. And yeah, this looks fine now, right? So we are going to run this query. We are going to look for the user, right, with a specific ID. And if we get any error, we could simply say response.status 404. And in the message, we could say user not found, right? Because that's what 404 is, not found. All right. On the front end jQuery part, it's still going to go in fail section, not in done section, but in fail section, because anything 400 or 500 is considered to be, request failed. How do you differentiate between sending 400s and 500s? How would you differentiate if the status you need to send has to be 400s or 500s?
400 is user side, 500 is server side.
Right. Any example of a server-side error?
The database fails to connect.
Right. Database fails to connect, right? Or I don't know, your code broke somewhere. You were trying to you were trying to access a maybe you were trying to call response dot um, blah blah function, all right? But this function does not exist, right? This is gonna throw an error. Now this is not Java, right? There's no compiler. There's nothing that's gonna give you error uh, beforehand. You're only gonna get this error when you actually run the code, right? So this is gonna be a server error too, because this is not the fault of client. This is not the fault of browser. It's not that browser sent something that this error arised, right? So in these kind of cases, you want to send a 500. And that's the reason where we have global error handler for everything JOI. We are sending 400, and everything else that we don't know about, we are sending 500, because that most likely has to be some issue generated on the backend, right? Any question? Okay. If I do app.use, right, and here if I have request response next, right? Let's say I do not have this code, right? Could this be my error handler? I'm having this after my routers on line number 29.
No,
Why not?
because it has three parameters. It should be for bit error too.
Right. So there's a huge difference between regular middlewares and error handler. All right. Error handler would always have 4 parameters. This would become error handler only if you, as you said, only if you have fourth parameter, which is error, right? Right. Another question. So this is my error handler, right? And I receive my error in ERR object here, right? Um, what if I move this? What if I move error after request? Would my code still work fine?
I don't think so. Error has to be at the beginning.
No,
I don't think so. Let me know in
no.
the reactions. Give me a yes if you think this would work fine, and give me a no if you think this would not work fine. If you think this would work fine, give me a yes. And if you think it's not gonna work fine, give me a no. 5 people said no, 2 people, 3 people say yes. One person says go faster. uh, okay, 7 people say no, 3 people say yes. Okay. Um, so answer it depends. All right. You need to check for yourself if your answer is correct or not. Now, it would work fine in the sense that this would still be treated as an error handler because it has 4 parameters, right? It doesn't matter what you call these variables. You could call these variables A, B, C if you want, right? No one cares. The only thing Express cares about it is that it has 4 parameters, right? So this would be treated as an error handler, right? It would not work correctly in the way that your error would not be received in this variable, right? Again, you can give these whatever name you want to give. Express doesn't care about it. Express is still gonna give you, it's still gonna pass you the error in this object, in the first object, right? So you're not gonna have anything in ERR object, right? But your error is actually going to be in REQ object, right? So although it would technically work in the sense that it would be treated as a default error handler, but it's not going to work in the sense that your errors are not going to be in ERR. Your errors are going to be in REQ object, right? So either you need to fix this or you need to change this ERR. Let's say if this was A, you need to change this ERR to A.
So basically, the first parm is the error.
Yes. Doesn't
Does
matter
the
what the name is. The first
okay,
parameter is where the express is going to pass the error.
okay. Does the other parms matters?
Name
They
never
must, right?
matters.
No, name doesn't matter. That I understand. The order does then.
Uh, Order in the sense that first parameter would always be an error,
Error, yeah.
second would always be request object,
Okay,
third one would always be response object, and the last one would always be next,
okay.
right? Now, again, you can call them A, B, C, D, but that would still mean this contains the error, this contains request object, this contains response object, and this contains next object, right? I'm going to fix this error, request, response, next. And by the way, the same thing
Is that
applies here.
because that's how we defined in the app.js?
No, that's because that's how Express defines it. Because Express says, hey, I'm gonna pass the first parameter because this function, we define this function, but we don't call this function, right?
Okay.
Uh, Express calls this function. So Express says, hey, whenever I'm gonna call this function, this is the sequence in which I'm gonna pass the parameters, right? Uh, and the same thing applies here. Whenever we are defining a route here, the first object is always request, second is response, and third one is next, right? Doesn't matter what you name them. You can change the name here if you want, right? Request object could be R, or response object could be RS, and next object could be N, right? That doesn't change anything. These names are just variables that we are defining.
Where do we see this order? Sorry, I'm just
Like, how would we know this
which
order?
one is which? Yeah,
So that's always the documentation.
yeah. I was looking for. Okay, I'll look for it. No problem.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you know how in case of Express, we are using this order specifically, and in case of SQL query, we have this order of error and result. Uh, like you don't have to know this. Uh, you have to find it. You literally have to go to the documentation of Express and see. And in case of SQL query, you literally have to go to the documentation of SQL and check out npm SQL. Uh, was it SQL or MySQL? Package.json, MySQL. Never mind. So MySQL. Oh, MySQL npm. I'm gonna go here. So it says this is how you install it, and this is how you create a new connection, and it gives an example. But what we are looking for is API documentation, right? So in this case, it shows an example and you kind of get an idea from the example, but I'm pretty sure they have like proper API documentation for this, which mentions everything. Let's quickly check out if you're able to find it. Performing queries. The most basic way to perform a query is to call dot query method on an object. The simplest form of dot query is dot query. You give the SQL string, and then you have a callback function, right? And we are interested in this callback function, right? The second form is you can do a dot query SQL string and values. You see, sometimes we actually pass the request.body object here when we are inserting or something. This is the second form that we use sometimes. And then you have the callback function. You can pass options too. That would be the third way of doing it. We haven't used this, right? And this is where they're defining the callback function, where you see they say error will be an error if one occurred during the query. Results will contain the results of the query, and fields will contain information about the returned results fields, if any, right? So again, I would have to come to documentation and look for this. Now, this is one way of finding something. Another way of finding something is going here, and when you hover on this, right, um, it's going to show you the signature of the entire function, right? These are usually written in TypeScript these days, right? And it's going to show you that this is the way you can actually call this function. The first uh, the first thing you can pass is options, which could be a string or which could be query options. Then you have values, which is optional, and then you have a callback, which is again optional. Uh, a question mark means optional, right? This might be a little complicated for you guys to read because you guys haven't seen TypeScript before. So this is where they're defining all the types. And if you feel very adventurous, you can actually click on it, click on command, and then click on it, and it's gonna even show you, the definition in more detail. And you can click on each type and check out their interfaces, see how they actually work. When they say query callback function is of type query callback, you can click on it. You can check this too, and you can see first one is error, ERR, which could be null or which is gonna be of type MySQL error. Second is results, which could be of any type because it could be anything from the database. And the third thing is fields, right? Again, I know this is a little complicated, so maybe documentation would be our best bet for now.
Question.
Yeah.
And since the error handler middleware is called by Express, so we will have just one, right? All the
Mhm.
time,
Mhm.
right? We cannot have more than one handler.
You cannot have more than one handler. I think you would be able to. Um, let's quickly check.
Because how you call this when you are in the, let's say, user, uh, you mentioned, let's say, next and error, so directly it come to here.
Yeah, it might be possible to go from one error handler to another. Um, and again, I can actually quickly test this. So let's say if I want to write a different error handler for JUI and another error handler um, for my other errors, right? So maybe I would say, hey, whenever you receive an error, okay, what am I missing here? Okay, this is not supposed to be here. All right, so in the sequence, I'm putting this first, and I'm gonna remove this. right? And what if I say else? Just take the error to the next error handler. So I'm going to put a debugger at these two places. Let's run the server dev. Debugger attached. Wrong folder. Close all. App.js. Okay, wrong file again. Right, I'm going to show you guys the code. Have a look at the code first properly, right? Before I actually testing something, before I start testing. And I'm going to leave this with you guys for a minute or two.
In this case, the sequence is matched. It's matched.
Sorry, say that again, please.
The sequence.
Yeah.
The sequence is matched. Here, right?
The sequence is not right.
Is matter here.
The sequence does matter here actually, because in this case, because this is the middleware that I've defined first. This is the middleware that would get called first, right? And I'm saying, hey, I'm handling GUI errors here. If it is a GUI error, and if it's not a GUI error, I'm just gonna send the error to the next middleware. And Express is gonna take that error, and Express is gonna say, all right, do I have any middleware after this which handle errors? And it's gonna find this error handler, right? This is what I expect would happen. But again, let's make sure that my assumption is correct, right? So I'm going to go here, debug, dev, put the debugger here, put the debugger here. Looks good. Okay, let's go to Postman. What is this hero app? No, create user. Okay, this post users. All right, we are missing something from GUI here, right? So if I send this, it comes in the first error handler. We check if it's an error, and if error dot sgy is true, which is true, right? So it's gonna come in here. It's gonna send this error, considering it's a GUI error, and we are gonna receive validation error and blah blah blah, right? Uh, if that is not the case, I think we need to provide name and email. Right, let's try to generate other error where the email is duplicate, let's say. Right, it says inserted. I'm going to run the same thing again. And now in this time, so this is Express things. Express takes an error whenever one is sent to a middleware, and Express is going to say, all right, I have an error. I need to find an error middleware. All right, and after the router. And this is the first thing Express is gonna find. Express is gonna say, all right, I have found an error handler. I know because this has 4 parameters, right, rather than 3. So this is a error middleware, and it's gonna come in here, and then we are gonna check if it's a JOI error, and it's gonna say if no, and then we are gonna take the error and we are gonna say, hey, find next middleware for this error, right? When that happens, as I was, expecting, it's gonna say, all right, after this, is there any middleware which handle errors? It's gonna find this middleware which handle errors. It's gonna come to this one. It's gonna say, all right, status 500, something went wrong. Let's go ahead, right? And so it's gonna send. Oh, wait a minute. I think something actually went wrong. Cannot set headers after they're sent to the client. Okay, let's see why that's happening. Sponsor. Okay, else next. This should be fine. This is just one statement. And here, do I need a return? Shouldn't be needed though. App.js line number 40. Looks fine to me. Let's see why it's not working. Oh no, it is, right? Is it? Oh, this is a very specific error that's being handled here, right? We are already sending a response here. Right? We need a return here actually. That's what's going. Either we need a return here or we need an else here. Okay, I think I screwed up something here. Okay, if error, you do this. If this is a specific error, handle this. Okay, otherwise, if it's not a specific error, you just send the error ahead. This return is not supposed to be here. And if it's not an error, in that case, it would just send this response. Okay, but the question is, how would we generate an error from here? Because if it's an email error, we are handling it properly, right? So either we remove this handling. Okay, just for the timing, just to regenerate, some error in here. I'm just gonna remove this part for now, right? So if there is any error, it could be from email. We are just sending it to the middleware to handle it generically. If I do that, I send this. My error should come to the first error handler, and then it should go to the second error handler, right? And then it should send the response from here. Because in the first case, it does not satisfy this condition, and it actually sends to the next error handler, right? And now we should get something went wrong.
Is there a difference if we pass the error to the next middleware or just throwing it, throw error?
Yes, there is a difference. So when you actually do a next, you are saying, "Hey Express, take my error and take it to the next middleware that handles errors." If you just throw an error, that's gonna be a Node.js error that you would be throwing, and your application is just gonna crash right away, right? Because Node.js is gonna think that something blew up in your application, and it's just gonna throw error in here, and your front end might never get a response.
Okay, the right way is to pass to the next middleware.
Yeah, Again, just to verify what I'm saying. So rather than sending the error to the next middleware, if I throw the error like this, let's see what happens. It's going to come here. This condition is going to be false, right? So it's going to go here. I'm going to show you guys my terminal here. This is what we have right now, right? And now if I play, it goes here to the next error handler. Did send 500. All right, so I was wrong. Even if you throw error from in here, Express takes care of it automatically.
It catches. Yeah.
It catches the error automatically. Yes, I was wrong about it. But I'm pretty sure this is
But
not how it works.
don't you
If
need a
you
return in the first middleware?
do, I need return in the first middleware.
If
Mhm.
instead of going to the next one. Because if it's not 400,
Mhm.
then it could be 500 or it's okay.
It cannot be okay.
It cannot be okay.
Because
Correct.
one thing we know is we are in error middleware, so something's wrong for sure,
Okay.
right? So either it's a 400 if it's a GUI error.
Or something
If
else.
not, we are throwing an error. Now, even if you put a return statement, it's never gonna hurt you,
It's never okay.
right? It's never gonna hurt you if you have a return statement here, or even here, right? Be very careful. You ideally need to have a return when you do a next, because I was facing an issue here because I was doing a next, but I wasn't doing a return after next. So my code goes to the next middleware, but also goes after the next, which is not what I want, which is going to create confusion for me, right? So next does not stop your execution. Throw does. So let me show you what I was saying. Right, before I had this, right? And this is wrong, right? There's some problem here. I'm going to give you, let's say, 1 minute to have a look at this code first and to understand what this is, right? Before I start explaining what the problem is. All right, now let's see what could go wrong here, right? Now what happens is if you check this if condition, if error code is this, send this response. Yeah. So let's say if you receive an error, but that error is not of this type, all right? Or sorry, error is of this type, all right? So you're gonna receive the error and then you're gonna check the code and that code is gonna be equal to this. It's gonna send the response here, right? But this is an if condition, right? And once this code executes, it's also gonna execute this line of code, right? And we don't want that. So you have two options. Either you have a return statement here so that once this executes, you're like, hey, I'm done. You don't need to execute any more line of code. You don't need to execute line number 25, right? This is your option number one, right? Again, I'm going to leave you guys here for a few seconds to understand this. If I have an error, and if the error is of this type, I want you to run the flow of code in your mind.
But there was a response, and after response, it should not go backward.
Right. So response doesn't stop your execution of code. I know it sounds counterintuitive, right? We're like, hey, I sent my response to the front end. Why are you running my code? So it's gonna do both things. It's gonna send the response to the front end, but it's still gonna keep running the code,
So
right?
if you wanted, you can actually have a series of responses.
Node.js Express is gonna give you an error, and the reason is technically, yes, that's what you would have. You would have a response.json, which would send a response, and then you can have another response.json, right? So this is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
And you're saying, hey, I sent one response, and you're saying, Akash is saying, the execution is not going to stop. That means I can do another response.json. So technically, yes, but the problem is, although the code is going to execute, um, the HTTP protocol does not support this, right? You remember my favorite diagram? Let me show it to you guys again. I have to connect my iPad. Quick media player, file, new movie recording, and iPad from in here. Right, iPad. So if you guys remember this diagram that I draw a lot, which is here, this is your front end, right? This is your back end. So when you send this request, right, on any URL, which could be users or whatever, this is on HTTP protocol, right? HTTP or HTTPS doesn't change much in this case, right? And HTTP protocol works in this way. One request could only receive one response, right? So what's happening in that case is you send a request, you run some code, you have a response.json, right? And when this line runs, it sends the response to the front end over the internet, right? But then you have some more code running. You have another response.json, right? And when Express reads this line, Express is like, dude, response is gone already. What are you doing? Right? Like, what are you trying? Whatever you are trying to send now is not possible. It's too late, right? Uh, let's actually see how it cries. Another response. So I need to generate an error with a duplicate entry to show you guys this thing, right? To uh, replicate this error. So I'm going to send this. All right, so we have an error. Error is duplicate entry, and I want to send an error, send a JSON with user already exists, right? Right. So if you see, my Postman has already received the response, right? It's already done as per Postman. But my Express says that the Express says that it needs to run this line number 24, and when I run this line number 24, it's gonna throw an error right away, right? And let's see what it says. Cannot set headers after they are sent to client. It's saying, hey, you are trying to set something in headers when it's already sent to the client. It's like Postman was gonna, let's say if there was some courier company which was gonna come to pick up a box, and you prepared a box, you gave it to the courier company, the company took it, right? And then you prepared a box 2 hours later too. You can do that, but that box is never going to be taken away by the company because they're only going to come once. Make sense? Good analogy? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yeah? Okay. So technically the code runs, right? So even if I have a console.log here, console.log here, right? Right? Writing for free, right? I saved this. I'm going to remove this response.json. And if I send this, okay, backend is working. It's gonna come here. Before even my console.log runs, my call here is resolved. My postman says, I made a request, I have received a response, I'm done. Your HTTP request flow is done, but still this code is gonna run. And you see now it gives writing for free, right? And now it's gonna run this line of code too, which we do not want. We're like, we have already sent the response. We do not want the error to be thrown to the middleware now, right? So that's why it's gonna cause issues. So once we send the response, we do not want any code to be running after. So we are gonna say return to make sure that doesn't happen. That's option number one. Option number two is you put this piece of code in else, right? So there is nothing to run in the function anywhere. Right now, if I do this, it should work.
Is that possible that response will never deliver it to the client? For example, a client make a request and crashes, and you send a response, but it never will be delivered. Express care about it.
Um, does Express care about it? Not really. Express is gonna receive a request, and Express is gonna send a response to it. So if I understand your question correctly, you are saying that your front end makes a request, right? It says get all the users, right? And your backend, right? This is the front end. Your backend sends a response, right? Backend says, hey, this is the list of all the users, right? I'm sending it back. And your front end is not able to receive it because front end crashes, right? Our user closes the tab, right? Something goes wrong. It's lost in the internet, right? It's lost in the network because it's never going to be received. And Express doesn't care at all. Express says, hey, I received the request. I sent a response. I'm done, right? Whatever happens on the internet and whatever happens here on the front end is not my problem.
Okay, so there not I will not have a status received or not. It,
I mean, it doesn't matter anyway because your front end crashed anyway, right? So there's no one to receive it.
but I could log it if there is any problem. But
Yeah,
now I can't.
yeah. Another possibility is the other way around as well, where your front end sends a request for users, right? And backend receives it, right? But now backend crashes. I don't know, maybe your database is full, maybe you do not have any memory, maybe you are using a free version of an instance and it's overloaded and your backend crashed, right? Now your front end is gonna keep waiting. Your front end is gonna keep expecting a response, right? Because let's not forget there is no connection between backend and front end other than this HTTP request, right? And the front end is going to keep waiting, keep waiting, keep waiting. And in many of the cases, it would time out in like 1 minute or so. Um, Depends what framework you're using, what configuration you have, and all of that stuff. But ideally, you want to time out those requests, right? You want to time out and you want to handle that scenario here. Maybe on the front end, you would say, not able to fetch users. Please try again later, right? But these are more advanced use cases, real production level applications, let's say. These kind of things are handled, especially in mobile applications. This kind of stuff happens a lot. Um, so it becomes more important to handle all of this because your front end is usually loaded, right? And sometimes what happens is uh, you would not have any internet on your phone, right? If you are on a website and you do not have any internet, your front end is not going to load at all, right? So you never face that problem. But with a mobile application, you always have your front end on your app, right? It's always on the phone, whether you have internet or not, right? So this could happen that someone's using application and they do not have any network because their Wi-Fi went down or something, right? In those kind of cases, you have to handle those cases pretty well. Right. Any other questions, guys? Any other doubts? Yeah. We have generalized all of this for JUI in the sense that we are saying if we receive any JUI error, right? We are saying just give me the error, convert to string, and then send it to the front end. And we are doing this because we know that JUI is gonna generate relatively readable errors, right? So if I do this, right, it's gonna say, hey, error, and we can actually look into the error object too, right? So the message is email required, the stack is validation error, email is required, right? Uh, Relatively readable. Yeah, yeah. Okay, you are saying if I remove the age from here, you are not receiving any error for that? Oh, that's not possible because API would always respond the same way. So what you want to check is you want to check the network tab on the front end, on the browser first, to see if you are actually receiving the right thing. You should always receive the same thing. Backend doesn't care if you are making the request from the front end or the postman. The response should always be the same. You might, you should receive exactly the same thing. If you are receiving the message in Postman, you should receive the message in your front end as well. But you're not going to receive the message in done part because now we are sending the status 400, right? So if I go to the front end, right, we have a done part and we have a fail section, right? Now you're not going to receive it in done section because this is if jQuery runs this part of code if it gets anything in 200s. If it gets anything in 400s or 500s, it's going to run this section here, right? So if you need to fetch the message, you need to fetch the message the way I am fetching here. You would have to look into the XHR object, right? And then take the response JSON from there and then fetch the message from there. Right? And this should give you the error. Sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 Open up inspect. Let's see. Always have inspect open when you're working on the front end. Right. Let's go to network. Right. Click on XHR. Right on the right. Yes. Let's make that same request again. Sure. Right. Just one letter in name. Yeah, go to network. Oh, click on play button. We do not want the execution to stop. All of that is good. You know, where it says pause and debugger. Yes. Yes. Yeah. All right. Now let's look at the request in the network. Yeah, your requests are not visible. You see that console, you need to close it. You see that X on the extreme right? Um, okay, on the right side, extreme right. Yeah, yes, yes, yeah, right, right. A little bit on the bottom side below. You see that X to close the console? No, yes, yes, yes. Now click on that request. Yes. Yeah. Click on preview. All right. So you see you are not receiving a JSON from your backend, right? So maybe your error handler is not defined or is not working fine. Oh, you know what? You might be missing. Okay, let me share my screen. I think I know what the issue could be. I'll share my screen again. All right. It could mean that you are missing this part here. Right? It could mean one of two things. First, it could mean that you are missing this part, or it could mean that your error handler is not defined properly. I think the probability of this issue is more. Now, why we know this, we need it because we read this in documentation yesterday, where it says that, hey, if you, okay, let me show it to you guys. Right. And the reason that happens is because the documentation itself says when validation fails, this module will default to returning HTTP 400 with GUI validation error as a text plain response type. That's what you were getting, right? You were not getting a JSON in response. You were getting a plain text, from the backend. Whereas we want to stay consistent and we want all the communication to happen in JSON. So it says a pass error option is supported to override this behavior. This option forces the middleware to pass the error to the express error handler using the standard next function behavior, right? And that's what we want. And you can see this here as well, right? Any other questions, guys? Any other doubts? All right, any question regarding tests, anything?
Can you push your code, proper code?
Sure. This part here, right? Okay. Control C.
The user one and
Yeah, this is good. The only thing I'm gonna do is I'm not gonna push day 9. This is something incomplete right now. Oh, this is not in get ignore. Too late though. Anyway, get status. Mm. Oh, it says modified. It's already in there. Never mind. So git add app.js. Right, you don't need this. Right, everything good. Git commit -m -9. Good push. Good push origin. All right, it should be there. Can you please verify? Just check once to make sure that you have the code that I just pushed. All right, anyone has any other question? Someone said, can we have 5 minutes break before the exam? 5 minutes? We are gonna have a 30 minutes break before the exam. All right, you're gonna have 30 minutes before exam. Yeah, I'm not kidding, I'm serious. It's 10:25 right now. Let's get back by 10:55 and then we'll start the exam. Right, 10:55 a.m. Again, any last questions before the exam? All right, it's been real, guys. It's the end of web services. It's been fun teaching you guys. I wish you everyone good luck. You guys are gonna be in the market soon. You guys are gonna be in the industry soon. Good luck. Have a fun break, and let's see each other in 30 minutes.
I don't see your changes in GitHub.
No.
All I see is day 8.
It's in day 8.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
gonna be in
okay.
day 8.
Back end day 9. Okay.
Yeah, in day 8
Quick.
backend. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a request for the project. There is, let's say, deadline to submit it.
I'm really sorry, Khalil. It's very hard to hear you right now.
For
Can
the
you please
project submission,
Yeah.
submission deadline, when?
Yeah. When is the deadline?
Can be like Monday midnight.
Can it be Monday midnight?
We benefit
Sure.
from Monday because Monday off, I think.
Yep. Project deadline right now is Monday end of the day.
Oh, okay. Because you mentioned before it's Monday morning.
Okay. You know what? I've made it Tuesday end of the day. All right.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You could have asked for anything today. Anything
Thank
else,
you.
guys?
Thank you.
All right. I have extended the deadline of the project by one more day.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem, guys. And please don't think that today the course is over, so you can't reach out to me. All right. I would not get paid, but I'm more than happy to help you guys. All right. If you are stuck with the project, if you need help with anything, just send me a message on Teams or Mio. All right. I'll ideally respond within 24 hours or so. If it's a weekend, I'm not sure. But I usually respond within a day or so. All right. And if it would be something more complicated, I'd be even okay having a call with any one of you who needs help. All right. So do not hesitate to get in touch if you need any help.
Thank you.
No problem. Anything else, guys? Anything? All good? Right. See you guys in 30 minutes then.